I worked in James's and it was my day off. I was going in to get some Christmas shopping. So my boss rang me and said to me, Chris, can you come in? She said, because I'm really stuck. So obviously I get the phone call at what time? 9 o'clock off Anthony's stepmom saying, get over here, get over here. Anthony's dead, he's been shot. And I was like, I thought, what's she on about? Because it just didn't click.
The 80s had the General, the 90s had John Gilligan, and in the noughties it was the reign of Martin Marlo Hyland. He ruled over the drug scene, working his way up the ranks, taking the opportunity to step in when others fell by the wayside. He grew increasingly reckless and paranoid and therefore became a liability. He had to go. And the circumstances of his death just added to his legacy. That an innocent young man doing an honest day's work lost his life is just terrible. You're listening to Caught in the Crossfire, Episode 4, An Honest Day's Work.
We heard it in the newsroom. I was in the Mirror, I remember, in the North Circular Road. The details started to become apparent. We'd known that Marlo Hyland had been moving between homes. At that point, he was staying in his niece's house. The pressure had certainly come on. We started to hear how he'd been asleep in bed and the gunman had broken in. And it was really one of those seismic moments. I mean, there's been a number of them over the years, but it was one of those moments that everybody was all of a sudden talking about and what was going to be the impact. When you hear these things, you first hear a rumour of it when somebody is shot like that. You get calls, you start hearing about somebody has been shot, but it wasn't in his home, his family home. So that all of those starts to cloud this. And these rumours, of course, can be wrong. But it did quickly emerge that this was going to have a major impact in gangland and that Marlo Hyland, we heard pretty quickly then it was confirmed that he'd been shot dead in his bed. And it was one of those end points where this had been the guy who had been the most feared godfather in the city. We were told that he'd been shot dead while hiding out in his niece's house, effectively.
Anthony Campbell and his boss, David Murphy, arrived at Elaine Hyland's house on the 12th of December 2006 at around 8:45am. Anthony had recently completed a forced training course in plumbing, and this was his second stint working as an apprentice. He was less than 2 weeks into his new job. A few minutes after they arrived and started to bleed the radiators, Elaine left the house with her 2 little girls. She told them she was dropping the eldest one to school and would be back shortly. David Murphy also left the house a few moments later as he needed some extra valves to finish the job, which he could get at a heat merchant's outlet nearby. As soon as Murphy pulled off in his van, 2 men who'd been waiting outside in a parked-up car made their way quickly and quietly into the house, believing that only Marlo remained. The front door had been left open to allow the plumbers to get in and out. But Anthony was in a downstairs room working on a radiator, and when they saw him, one of the men stayed with him as the other crept upstairs. The sound of 6 gunshots blasted out before the killer came running back down the stairs. It later emerged that one of the hitmen was from the same area in Dublin City where Anthony was living with his dad. Fearing that Anthony would be able to identify him, he raised his gun and pointed it straight at him. The terrified young man lifted his arm, trying to shield himself. A single shot went straight through his hand and hit him in the head. He was killed instantly. It took the gunmen just 6 minutes from the time they entered the house until they jumped into a black Volkswagen Passat and drove away. Back in the house, Anthony's dead body lay slumped by the radiator he'd been trying to fix. At about 9:30am, his boss arrived back. Unable to get in the front door, he began ringing Anthony's phone. As he stood there, wondering what was going on and trying to get through to Anthony, Elaine Hyland and her younger daughter returned and opened the front door with her key. She was the one to find Anthony's body. An associate of Marlo's, one of his few remaining loyal foot soldiers, who was acting as his driver, then arrived. He sprinted up the stairs and discovered Marlo's bullet-ridden body still lying in his bed. In the following days, the general public's disgust at the violence and blatant disregard for human life of Gangland Ireland reached epic proportions. Another dead criminal was one thing, but the killing of an innocent apprentice plumber was beyond the pale. As the public and politicians continued to denounce the assassinations in Finglas and Gangland Ireland moved quickly to accommodate the new shift in power, over in a house on New Street in Dublin 8, Anthony Campbell's mother, Christine, was still struggling to comprehend that her only child was dead. Christine was 40 years old when Anthony was murdered. She was living at her family home in the south of the city and was working full-time as a cleaner in St. James's Hospital. She's a petite woman with dark brown hair and hazel-coloured eyes. She'd met Anthony's dad in her teens and was pregnant by the time she was 19. But things didn't work out between the couple, and when Anthony was 18 months old, she'd decided to move to London to try life over there for a while. She'd a good network of family around her in both cities, which is unsurprising really, given that her own mother was one of 17 children. She has, as she told me, hundreds of cousins all over the place. Christine was involved in another long-term relationship in the UK, and they enjoyed a nice life, holidaying for weeks at a time in their caravan, which they'd drive down to the South English coast each summer. Anthony was a bright fella, with a wicked sense of humour. Photos of him as a small boy show a sweet-looking youngster with a sheet of straight blonde hair. He was the spitting image of the Milky Bar kid from all those TV ads. Even as he got older, he never completely lost that baby-faced look, which could sometimes make it a little tricky to maintain a social life.
I mean, he had everything. He loved his football. What was it? I used to find this funny. If he didn't get into a pub because he looked too young, he'd stand outside and get a bottle of Budweiser and he'd be waving at the fit. He was a little bit of a character now, but he knew in life you had to work. I did and braid that into him, you know, because I always say if you like nice things, you know, you have to work for it and save for it. And I did install that.
And then you can appreciate them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, God, he loved his Prada. Yeah, his shoes were £400. Oh. Yeah, he loved his style. But then he started trying to talk Irish when he was in Dublin. You know, but he was definitely Cockney Anthony. But then he'd say things and I'd say, Anthony, that doesn't suit you. But he had a nice bunch. That I found that heartbreaking, all his friends, the football team, when they all carried his coffin in. And I just said, they're too young to be going through that. But he was a bit of an Arthur Daly as well, because he sold in Henry Street and he got the fake Tiffany stuff and he was telling everyone it was real. I said, you'll be murdered on me. People come back, you know. Yeah, he was a bit of a wheeler and dealer. He loved his money.
But you must have had an incredible closeness. There was the two of you on your own in London. You were working, trying to raise him. I mean, what was that like?
Do you know what? He never gave me any bother. As long as he had all his goodies, stuff like that. And I worked in a pub, right? And around the corner there was stockbrokers. So we had to do experience work. So one of them took him on and he fell asleep. He said he was that bored. Then he worked for the Sun paper and he met Ross Fing's wife, because she was the editor. Do you know, the one with the ginger hair?
Yeah, Rebecca Wade. Yeah.
And he wasn't sure of that. And then
was he going to be a journalist, like?
No, he just done it for work experience. And that was the surprising thing, because he was good with computers and he had a brain on him. And when he actually said he was going into plumbing, I was like, God, Anthony, you're a bit more clever than that. Do you know what I mean? But he excelled. He flourished in it. No, I wouldn't have associated him with that job. I would have put him into IT or something like that, because he seemed to have that interest, but he liked it.
And when he was a small child in London and you were there and you didn't have that support system of that vast family you still have in Ireland.
Yeah.
So you've countless aunts and uncles and cousins and all that. So how did you cope then? I mean...
Well, I was with a guy at the time. His mum was brilliant.
Right.
We had a nice lifestyle. We had a caravan. So we used to go down in the 6-week summer. And my dad's aunties, I had some family over there.
For a number of years, Anthony had no contact with his father back in Dublin, and Christine sought no child maintenance. She was happy to raise him on her own. But as he got older, it was decided he should get to know his dad, and he'd return to Ireland for a week or so at a time to stay with him and his wife and their kids at their home in the Greek Street flats near Smithfield. Although Christine loved London, she was beginning to feel uneasy at the rising levels of knife crime in their area. It was never somewhere she'd felt totally safe. As a young teenager, Anthony had never been allowed play out on the street by himself. As he got older, and she could no longer expect to control his movements as much, and she was beginning to worry that he might get caught up in something sinister. She decided to move them back to Ireland, a decision that took Anthony some time to get used to. It was also becoming clear to Christine that Anthony, who was now 17 years old and at that tricky age when some silly choices might be made, could do with a stronger male presence in his life. And so it was arranged for him to live with his dad and his family. It's a minor detail, but it led to some serious confusion on the day he was shot.
There was a mix-up when Anthony died, because Anthony was staying with his dad. And what they didn't understand was I didn't get told, there was confusion because Anthony's dad's wife said, she didn't say that there was me, I was the real mother.
Oh.
Yeah.
So they were told?
Yeah, they were told because he
was staying with...
Street.
Yeah. Oh, that's what the Greek Street was?
Yes.
So you weren't Greek Street then?
No, I was at New Street.
Oh, over in Dublin 8?
Oh, yeah.
I lived there.
Yeah. I was at New Street.
Yeah.
And Anthony was doing his apprenticeship. So that's how there was a bit of confusion.
Yeah.
When it all happened.
And so what happened? You didn't hardly hear it on the news or anything, did you?
No, I got the phone call off his wife. What happened was that day, I worked in James's and it was my day off. I was going in to get some Christmas shopping. So my boss rang me and said to me, Chris, can you come in? She said, because I'm really stuck. So obviously I get the phone call at what time? 9 o'clock off Anthony's stepmom.
9 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah. Saying, get over here, get over here. Anthony's dead, he's been shot. And I was like, I thought, what's she on about? Because it just didn't click. Because what happened was, at Christmas, didn't he lose his job? What happened was, they let him go, and that's how he got to working with that chap.
Right. All these little things that, had they not happened...
Yeah, because her car didn't start that morning either. So God knows if she had been there, you don't know.
You don't know. So 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Sounds stupid, but like, I don't know ever getting that phone call, but like 9 o'clock in the morning, it must have been completely surreal.
Oh, definitely. And then I left I was in the middle of getting the kitchen ready for, doing the breakfast, and I just left it. But this woman came with me because I could hear it on the radio, and I was saying, that can't be him, because it just didn't click, because I'm not saying me boy wasn't in trouble or anything like that, so you associate gangsters with one another, not innocent people, but it was just like, what way would I put it? Your head's okay, but your body shuts down because you're just in shock.
Yeah, shock is a huge thing for you physically to deal with.
Definitely.
You went over with
a woman,
and you were in the car on the way over, and it was coming up on the news, and it was all...
Yeah, saying 2 guys were shot, and I was like, no, this is wrong.
Someone's got it wrong.
And you're listening, but you're not listening. Then it goes up, and they were all howling and screaming, and I was like, I was saying to myself, he's going to come home and have a breakdown. Because he wouldn't be used to seeing that, the drama. Mm-hmm. And that's what it was.
This was where? Up at Greek Street?
Yeah.
So you got as far as there?
Yeah.
And what was the next move? Did you go out to Finglas then?
No. My family come and get me. Because it was like nobody knew anything. When I was in Greek Street, they were all howling and it was like, Jesus Christ. So when I got home to New Street, all my family was there, all the neighbours. So it was just...
Do you remember now what time
What?
that was at? You're talking about 10 a.m. then?
No, I'm talking about 11:15. Because the doctor in Greek Street was coming out to see to the grandmother, the father. And I was just sitting there and I thought, I rang my family and I just said, come and get me. Because I still couldn't get... It's unreal. The only time I kind of knew when it started to sink in was when I seen him in the dead house. Not the dead house, what's that, the morgue?
The morgue.
And what killed me was they said, don't touch him. And that was brutal. Because then it was like, there he is. Because something in my head kept saying, he's going to come home. But I knew I was starting to get my head around it. I think it was on the Thursday that we had to go to the marina.
And who went with you?
All my family. And the dad walked in first. And then I walked in. And I just sat there at the side. He stood there. And I just sat there and kept looking because he said, do not touch him. And I thought, oh my God, it is him, And he said, I'm going to go outside. He said, you're going to make yourself ill. I said, well, I want to sit here for a while. I just sat there because I didn't know what else to do. And I was like, you can't touch them, you can't. So you're just like, there he is.
And you can't touch them. I mean, that must be so...
That was horrific.
Horrific. And could you not just touch him at all?
No, because it was, they said forensic and, so you just done. Then when I got him on the Saturday morning, I'll never forget it. I went up to Massey's with his clothes and stuff like that. They had him lovely and they had this net thing on him. But it took me a while to feel him because I didn't want to feel the reality. And I was scared to touch him. And I sat there, but I came around and then I started being able to do things. But, yeah, that was unreal.
Was that the Saturday after the Tuesday or the one after that again?
No. The Tuesday he died and I got his body back on the Saturday morning. But I didn't run away with him. I kept him. Because he died on the Tuesday and he got buried the following Wednesday. Like some people, I thought, no, I want some time with him. And on that first Christmas, I'll never forget it. To go up to a grave Christmas morning. Oh, it was horrific. To drive up to Newland Cross, the whole flowers was up to that from people. And it was just like, this is where I'm going now. And in the first year, I worked in James's. On my break, I used to go to the grave nearly most days on my break. Just to sit there, especially in the summer. But then the winter, and then I just started saying to myself, you don't have to go to the grave as much. You have to kind of talk yourself through the process because you don't even know what you're going through yourself.
Yeah.
Christine went back to work in St James's Hospital a few months later. She also began to do media campaigns to try and help move along the investigation into Anthony's murder, hoping that someone might come forward and be willing to give the kind of evidence that would get the gunman charged. She began with an appearance on The Late Late Show and then spoke to newspapers and radio shows. It was an agonising process, but it was something she felt she had to do for Anthony.
I would say the first 2 years is the toughest because It's one thing dealing with your child dying, but having to open your heart up to the public. And then you can't say this, you feel you're being silenced all the time, if that makes sense.
So do you mean the extra pressure that you sort of had to get out there, fight for justice for him?
Totally, yeah. And then they'd say, you can't say this and you can't say that. And I was like, well, what's the point of doing it? I know you can't just be...
Yeah.
But I was like, yeah, there was all that. So it was a whole new... a ball game that I wasn't used to.
But you did a really good job with all that. And you came across really, really well.
I tried my best.
Well, you did.
But you always doubt yourself, because there's always something that you're saying, what more could I have done? And as a mum, I can be hard on myself, because I don't feel I got the justice I should have for him. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm let down by that.
And when did that kick in, that sense? Because that
so
can't surely kick in immediately when you're still in that deep shock.
Tell you when it kicked in, as the years start going on, and I thought, man, you'd get how I experienced it was, you get your hopes up, and then your hopes is crushed. And as the years start going on, yeah, it does something to you, because you cannot say you haven't changed in all the grief, but yeah, you're still looking, you feel like you haven't done him proud because you didn't get the justice. That lived with me, because it is what it is.
And so it's like a year goes by, a second year goes by, a third year goes by, and you know that whoever has done this, has taken him from you and has taken his life, is still free.
Yeah. Or even in prison, I knew that.
Yeah.
But
they're not, he was never serving.
No, the time for
Anthony.
And that was the bit I couldn't, it took me a long time to get my head around that.
In between trying to help push the investigation ahead, working full-time in St. James's, and learning to cope with her grief, Christine also had the practicalities to deal with after Anthony's death, like organising a headstone for his grave. It's a very striking monument with a detailed carving of a young footballer and a photograph of Anthony. There's also a verse etched on the front.
Yeah, because he died at Christmas. He was going to be 21 that July, and I'm 40. I had him on the 11th, and my birthday's the 14th of July. So what I gave him for his 24th, which I know sounds a bit a headstone, where I should have been giving him a party, you know. And then I sent to the Taj Mahal to get the footballer on it. I had to have that one.
What was that?
The guy that I just didn't want an ordinary headstone.
Yeah.
He loved football. Arsenal was his thing. So we had to order from the Taj Mahal, right? The footballers on it.
From India?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just the verse where I kept it. I didn't want people going up to the grave and going, oh. I wanted to keep it young. And he's probably saying, what the bleeding hell is she thinking? My cousin's daughter's boyfriend was a bit of a poet. So my cousin said to me, Christine, what about you? There's not enough. When you go, I said, I'll just throw him here and I'm not worried. Because you don't think right. Because you don't think of the things that you should be thinking of.
After a loved one dies, especially in tragic and unnatural circumstances, it doesn't take long before those left behind start asking questions. For Christine, there was so much confusion about how her son had got caught up in one of Gangland Ireland's most notorious assassinations. The rumours and speculation swirling around were, as you can imagine, wild. And everyone had a theory about who it might have been who took out Marlo Hyland. For a short time, there was a strong belief that Desi O'Hare, the former provo who infamously kidnapped a Dublin dentist and cut off 2 of his fingers in 1987, was connected in some way.
Desi O'Hare enters the story because of a sentence he was serving in Portlaoise prison. At the time, Desi O'Hare was one of the most infamous people in this country. There's no doubt about it. Desi O'Hare was called the Border Fox because he operated on the border since he was a teenager. He'd become signed up member of the IRA, involved in an assassination squad that would target British soldiers near the border area. He left the IRA after falling out with them and became involved in the INLA. And probably he's best known to people because of an horrendous incident where he kidnapped a dentist in the Republic of Ireland. The paramilitary organisations were involved in kidnapping and demanding ransoms, and Desi O'Hare kidnapped John O'Grady, an innocent dentist who had no involvement in anything at any point, and demanded a ransom off his family. While that ransom wasn't handed over straight away, he tortured him, chopped off his fingers, and they were sent to his family as a result. The guards during this whole time were trying to trace him and eventually became involved in a shootout with the Gardaí, eventually was caught and put on trial and convicted. But while he was in prison, he was housed in Portlaoise prison where a number of the paramilitary organisations were there. But while he was in jail, Desi O'Hare struck up friendships with some of the gangland criminals who were there, including Eamon Kelly, who'd eventually be killed, but also including Dutchy Holland.
But back in 2006, I think Desi O'Hare had been released that April, about 8 months before Marlo was murdered. So how did he get dragged into all this?
Well, he got dragged into it because I suppose by the time Desi O'Hare was released in 2006, probably the peak of his paramilitary days were past him. And Marlo Hyland seemed to relish in having these notorious figures around him. And so he kind of half set him up. Even when they were in prison, Marlo Hyland had visited the jail, visited Dutchy Holland 13 times, used to put some money in the commissary accounts for Dutchy Holland and his friends to allow them to buy stuff in the tuck shop. And when Desi O'Hare came out, Marlo Hyland helped set him up in Dublin. Desi O'Hare had fallen out with a lot of his associates and at that point didn't seem to fancy going back up the north. So Desi O'Hare had been spotted, and the Sunday World and other papers had stories about the Border Fox associating with the Mr. Big of the underworld at that stage. And obviously then when Marlo Hyland was killed, Desi O'Hare became maybe one of the initial people of interest that the Gardaí would look at, just because of his ferocious reputation and the fact that he had been involved in so much gun crime.
I think it was more the media that was looking at him than the Gardaí, because I mean, I think he had an alibi from the beginning. He was visiting a convent outside Dublin at the time of the murders. He was having this sort of religious retreat, actually. But I think the fact that O'Hare had been linked to Marlo Hyland, had been seen with him and in the house a number of occasions. I think he'd been seen in that house in Scribblestone Park, or certainly that was the rumour that he'd been in and out of it. So I think everybody, when something as big as Marlo Hyland's death occurs, jumped to certain conclusions, and that kept the media going for a while, the Desi O'Hare link.
Yeah, I mean, Desi O'Hare is a very unusual character. As you said, he had an alibi. He was on a religious retreat, and I mean, we eventually spotted him in Medjugorje, so he did seem to have become religious. Not so religious that he wouldn't end up in prison again, of course. But yeah, he became maybe an initial person of interest for the media, let's put it that way.
And like, I suppose under the terms of his release, he had strict restrictions, including not mixing with other criminals and not talking to the press. So he couldn't even claim his innocence if he wanted to. He had to just sort of suck it up himself.
No, he wasn't able to do these interviews. But I do think he let it be known that he wasn't involved in the murder of Marlo Hyland. Marlo had a pattern of trying to please these other criminals across the country, including Dutchy Holland, but also the Dundon McCarthy gang, and even his involvement in the murder of Biba Salute was not for financial means or for any personal motive, but solely just to keep all these guys happy. And I think he tried to use criminals like Desi O'Hare to make himself feel untouchable and to put across this image of being this godfather who had a finger in every pie and had the most dangerous people in the country at his beck and call.
Marlo was blasted to death while he slept. It was a typically ignominious end for a man who made his living through serious crime. Once the rumours began to settle down, 3 names began to emerge as the forerunners for being responsible for his death, and also the killing of innocent bystander Anthony Campbell. Their identities would surprise no one. Caught in the Crossfire is produced by Crime World. Writer and producer Jane Finnegan. Producer Clodagh Meany. Audio editor Jason Malini. Art and graphics Enda Bulger. Executive producers Nicola Tallant and Ian Malini. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.